It's very simple to create bat boxes and stuff. When I worked here in ag, all the barns I would go at, the old barns and water towers, they normally just put a piece of plywood with about 1 inch to a 1/2 inch of space and just nail it on there. And they'll go in there and build it and they will come. Of course, it has to be a kind of a shady area, not close to disturbance or light or anything like that, but it's good to provide habitat for them. So briefly, I'll talk about any common pests we find here. Aphids. Of course, we talked about the biocontrols. Ant management is very important because they like to feed on the honeydew and they kind of herd the aphids like cattle and protect them from other predators. Reflective mulch. I worked in the flower industry for one time. We grew poinsettias, and whitefly, which is same family as aphids, was a big problem. And they started using aluminum foil on the tables, so it was reflecting light up. So what that does, it disorients the insect, thinking, oh, this is like the sun is at a different angle here, and so they don't quite get their find their hosts. So also reflective mulch on beds for melons and squash and stuff I've seen. You got to be careful too, though. Here in the summer it's really hot, so if you have the sun reflecting the heat back up, it could burn up some plants, especially if they're not very. You can dislodge them. You can either or get a stream of water and whack them off. People think, oh no, they'll climb back on the plant. No, they won't. They were born on the plant. They're very slow and easy prey for any ground-dwelling predator to find. And then there's the soapy water thing, as well as the oils, diatomaceous earth. Neem is a pesticide, insect growth regulator derived from botanical. That basically what it would do is not necessarily kill them. Since they're piercing and sucking, they don't have access, they don't consume much. But it does affect their reproduction. So it's an insect growth regulator and it prevents them from maturing and so forth. It's, of course, prehistoric diatoms, little ocean-dwelling cells, single-cellular things. But they're very, very sharp. So they walk across it and stuff, and they'll, cut their cuticle, their skin, and they'll just desiccate. They'll lose moisture and eat them. Works for all type of insects. I use it with boric acid mixed in. There's products, I got it at Ace, I think, for ants and cockroaches, and I put it around the house. Oh yeah, that's a tough one. Their problem, actually their advantage, is they produce that wool. And that kind of protects them from any major predators. Before I came on, the city would treat trees, especially in areas in parking lots and stuff, with imidacloprid, which is a neonicotinoid, which is responsible for the bee decline. So we stopped using it. We only use it occasionally when we get serious complaints. It's a parking lot, an isolated tree. The problem is hackberries flower, and bees visited them for a certain period, so we're exposing them. So you got to kind of balance it out. But yeah, that one is tough. And unless you have like a high power hose that can reach the top of a tree or something. The thing with watering them down like that, it does wash off the honeydew and the stickiness and all of that, and you might dislodge some of them, but they're usually down in the crotches and little hard to reach places. Right. So yeah, I mean, homeowners go and get the insecticide at over the counter, and you can pour it into your root zone if you really want to get rid of them.
Don't they fly? If you're kind of looking at the diatomaceous earth that they're crawling.
Right. Well, you can see they usually crawl, but when the populations get so big, they develop wings. And not that they propel themselves, but they just throw themselves to the wind, and wherever the wind carries them, they use the wings to fly. But normally they're wingless. Populations are exploding, and the plant is already weak, and so you'll find wings. They'll develop wings. And they're all females, 99%. Occasionally there's a male and occasionally there is breeding, but they're asexual. They just start producing females, and those females are ready to go and produce females within a week or 10 days or so, depending on the temperature. So that's why you get the exponential growth. Any more questions on aphids? Caterpillars, barriers. That was more like at the base of a tree. Cutworms, for example, bury themselves in the ground and then they walk up at night and go and defoliate plants and so forth. A lot of natural enemies, predators, parasites on the eggs on different stages of growth. You can handpick them. Go out at night though, most of them work at night. Little flashlight under your vegetable leaves and you'll find them, and just, people are squeamish about it, but you just put them in a little bucket. And if you have chickens, they love them. Bacillus thuringiensis is a bacteria insecticide that's found that will control them, but you got to get them early when they're really young. First, second instar. By the time they're third or fourth instar, when they're about that big, it's more difficult to control them with BT. And Spinosad is another botanical type insecticide.
If Bacillus thuringiensis decays or
breaks down.
See, like just say if you start it in a hot garage for months and months.
Right. I don't think temperature, maybe the carrier or something, but I know that UV rays, like you put it out in a day and a hot summer day, knocks it off. Best thing to do is at night once the sun goes down. That way you have a full at least 12 hours to have it work. And since a lot of the worms go out and feed at night, it's the best way to do it. And then true bugs. Stink bugs, harlequin bugs. These guys are difficult, especially if you don't use chemicals, because you don't see them act, you just see the results. They pierce and suck, of course, little petioles or little setting fruit and so forth, and it will abort. The tomato, for example, has a little green bug called a tomato, what's it called, the plant bug or something. It looks like an aphid, actually. It's green. People don't notice it, though, and don't see it act until you get one or two tomatoes on your plant. You're wondering, well, what happened to the rest? Usually it flowers, and when the fruit's really tiny, and it attacks the flower, too, so the flowers abort, the little fruit shrivel up and die, and you don't get much production. So you have harlequin bug, which is there, which mostly, it's general. The problem I saw at the garden was people leaving their kale through the summer. And you go up and lift the kale leaf, and these guys are going to lunch. Breeding, eggs, everything, all stages, overwintering, oversummering, I should say. So you handpick them. Diatomaceous earth also, and there's another botanically based insecticide, pyrethrum, not to be confused with pyrethroids, which are synthetic and persistent and terrible. It doesn't break down, and they find it a lot in water sources, rivers, creeks, on the edge, so all the insects that breed in there are exposed to it, and it kills them off. And it doesn't break down very easily. It's very persistent. Pyrethroid. Pyrethrum, same thing, ultraviolet rays break it down. Not very persistent. Any questions on insects? How are we doing on time? We got, 10 minutes? Maybe we'll go a little over. Great resource, UCIPM. They got less toxic controls also besides the conventional ones, and you can choose whatever crop you need to deal with. So let's talk about plant diseases. What is a plant disease? Any disturbance of the plant caused by an organism that interferes with the normal structure, its function, or its economic value. The problem with plant diseases is that once you see the sign, it's too late, you have it. All the inoculum, everything's microscopic. Spores, fungal spores, viruses, of course, you can't see. Parasitic plants, I think, are the only thing that are considered a plant disease. Mistletoe, dodder, that you can probably control. So what causes them? Fungi, bacteria, virus, nematodes, and parasitic plants. There's some dodder down there. There was some Japanese dodder brought in Sacramento, and that's even worse than the one we have here. So just to give you an idea, the slide's upside down, but it doesn't matter. This is a plant cell. This is the head of a nematode. That's a hyphae mycelium from the fungi. You have a protozoa here. You have your mycoplasms, your bacteria. There's your nucleus. And these little dots here are viruses. They're probably even smaller than that. You can't really see viruses unless you have a really, really strong microscope. And there is no virus side. The way you deal with viruses are the vectors. Aphids, mites. So development stages of a plant disease, if you could break that cycle up, you're successful. You have the spores of already dying plant. The plant is stimulated to sporulate. It rides the wind, lands on a healthy plant, it germinates, penetrates, develops, sucks all the nutrients off. Meanwhile, you're getting yellowing or necrosis, and then finally it invades the whole plant, gets most of the nutrients, and then once the nutrients are all sucked up, it's time to move on and do the same thing. So, disease management strategies, resistant cultivars. A lot of times when you buy seed or transplants, it'll tell you it's resistant to viruses mostly, but some bacteria, fungi diseases, they're tolerant or resistant. Site selection, planting rotational strategies, avoid problem areas that don't drain well, that are really heavy soils, that stay wet all the time. Good drainage, exposure, air circulation, irrigation, very critical. People tend to water a little bit too much, you'll have diseases. Cut back on it, stimulate root growth, have the roots, stress your plants out a little bit, have them wilt a little bit before you water them. That'll stimulate root growth, and you'll have the plant roots, go down deeper and try to bring more moisture up. Exclusion by keeping contaminated material out, using clean stock, equipment, water. Mostly in farming, you would have that problem. They would cultivate one area that had some type of disease, and then they contaminate other plants. So now they have to power wash the equipment from field to field, depending if there's a known pathogen. Cultural practices, rotation, timing of planting, irrigation, fertilization management. Too much fertilizer also, like I said, it makes the plant really succulent, grow rapidly. Diseases clue into that and will invade. Sanitation, weeds, a lot of times the weeds harbor a lot of these problems. Solarization consists of basically pasteurizing your soil during the summer with the summer heat. Clear plastic, not black. Like a greenhouse, lets the ultraviolet rays in, heats it up. There has to be good moisture too. But it'll basically cook your weed seeds, most of them, as well as diseases, as well as insects and so forth. You peel that back, you don't disturb the ground, you don't do anything, you just plant right into it. Because if you do, of course you'll bring stuff up from the lower layers. And I've done that and it works like a charm, and then I've had native grasses reseed and native plants, and all the invasive foreign weeds are basically gone, except Bermuda. They like it when it's hot. As soon as I pull it off, but it was the first thing to come up. So right away I knew where it was, and I just went through and dug it out. You had a question?
Yeah, can you comment on nutsedge?
Ooh, that's another one. Well, now nutsedge, water management. It likes it wet. So if you have nutsedge, that means you've been watering a lot or a little bit too much. Now, the problem with it, let's say if you have it, it has those little nutlets that are, a plant arises from it and you see it, but then it also produces other nutlets where other plants are going to grow, and there's a fine little fiber that connects them, very delicate. You pull that plant out, boom, you cut that umbilical cord, if you will, and you have that little nutlet, and it's just going to keep going. One strategy is herbicides, Roundup. Because it's systemic. Oh, you've tried it?
It's not a like, oh, okay, it's gone.
No, you got to be persistent with it. You got to do it at least 2 or 3 times. And the other thing is that it's very waxy, and you need to put an adjuvant, either soapy water or something in there so that it breaks the tension and you get absorption. Because if you see the nut grass, when it's coming up, it's like a little spear, but once it opens up and stuff, very, very waxy leaves. So getting the material and having it stay on there and get absorbed is the other issue. So if you use an adjuvant, and you got to do it at least twice to get rid of nutsedge.
And then don't pull the dead plant up, is that what you're saying? 'Cause, I mean, then it's disconnected from.
Well, when the advantage of there is of using Roundup, for example, is that it's systemic and it will translocate into the rest of the plant and the root and that little nutlet, hopefully, killing it. But once you do pull it and you disconnect that, there's no contact. And there's another product, and actually they did sell it to gardeners at that on Olive Drive, that lawnmower place. L&M? Yeah, JB Mowers. Product called Sedge Hammer. And they would sell little packets that's like for 1 gallon, exclusively for nutsedge. Plus, there's another one that's similar. It's called elephant grass or elephant. Anyhow, it looks like giant nutsedge, but it's the same. It'll work on that too. So materials to control it, used in organic ag, copper, sulfur, oils, biocontrol, other organisms like that serenade, that Bacillus subtilis, bicarbonate soda for powdery mildew. Compost, people use compost teas, trying to spread the microbes on the phytosphere. We talked about rhizosphere. Well, the top also has organisms such as disease spores that will come germinate, will either invade the stomata like I mentioned before, or they can just go in between cell walls and invade. So some people, organic farmers, would use compost tea and try to get some of those beneficial organisms from the compost to put on the leaf surface. Again, ultraviolet rays, being exposed to light and stuff, you got to time it just right. Mulch. This was I don't know if this article's still up, but it was in Maryland. They planted the same variety, same time, same age, except they used, and fertilizer, chemical fertilizer, it wasn't organic, but they used black plastic mulch on one and straw mulch on the other. And look at the difference. And the one on the right, this finally petered out close to end of the summer, while this continued through the fall until the frost producing. Again, why was that? They didn't say, but I assume, it's the microorganisms working, decaying that straw mulch that's also influencing the roots, tomato roots, rhizosphere, and all those microbes, interactions, and so forth that protect it from disease. Soil-borne diseases, those are tough. Here, usually attacking seedlings, damping off, as it's called when you have little seedlings. Best thing to do is to use, nursery potting soil and grow out your transplants into nice and healthy. I know there's Phytosphere here occasionally. It all depends on how much water and how wet the soil is. But in organic ag, especially on the coast, this is becoming more and more a problem because they produce these survival spores that can stay in the soil for 30, 40 years. And when the conditions are right, boom, they'll germinate, they sense a host, and they'll invade. And no amount of organic matter will prevent them from doing that. Yes?
Back on mulch, we've got this butterfly hummingbird garden.
Yeah.
And we city has given us
The wood chips?
chopped up, trees.
Yeah, wood chips, yeah.
Mulch.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm concerned with is that probably decays very, very slowly.
It depends on the moisture. And it depends on the species of tree that you got. If you have softwood, it would go quicker.
Yeah.
I don't know. I put 6 inches there, and it's already down to about 3 or 4. So, and that's in a year.
Of that sort of mulch.
Yeah. Well, I don't know exactly if it was the same type of tree, but yeah. I don't think it'll be an issue. What are you concerned about? Just competition, or?
Well, I've often thought it's just probably decaying. I thought it decayed too slowly. I know it helps, reduce moisture loss. And all that.
Right. And smother weeds.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
That's why we use it in the parks,
Yeah.
basically for weed control.
Question?
Yes.
Is the black stained mulch, they have red, regular cedar, and then black.
Black.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The shredded bark, the black shredded bark.
Oh.
It's a dye that they add.
Really?
I put some of that stuff on a Japanese maple tree. They killed it in like 3
Yeah.
days.
Really?
Just
I looked at just a random internet search for dye mulches and stuff. It's like,
Yeah, I'd stay away from that. Why do you want to dye the mulch? Probably aesthetics, I guess. But the regular wood chips and stuff, at first it kind of looks kind of grayish and it starts breaking, especially if it's mixed in with leaves and starts breaking down. But after the first rain, all the easily broken down material is broken down, and then you have this nice woody mulch that looks attractive, and you put in native plants there, and it looks just fine.
Aren't some people trying to sell ground up tires or?
Oh,
or something
no,
like
no,
that?
no,
I mean,
no.
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, there's those artificial fields, sports fields that have been linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma due to the ground-up tires that they put down. Yeah, so stay away from that. Yes.
one problem I've had, if you're doing overhead watering on a sprinkler system and you put a whole bunch of mulch down, then what happens is the mulch all gets wet, but none of the water gets down
I know.
to the soil. So what do you do about that?
You don't. You put drip. You know what? I just get the hand hose and I go from plant to plant, just 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, once every 2 weeks. And it's kind of meditative for me out in the garden to do that. But yeah, if you do overhead, it's difficult, especially right now it's so hot and dry, that to get the moisture all the way down. The trick was to wet everything really good and then put the mulch down and then do the drip on it.
does it matter if you're putting wood shavings down, if you put the drip up on top or below the shavings?
Ideally, it'd be better, cutting a little trench. It doesn't have to be right where the soil is, but at least covering it up. And that way it's closer to the ground. Because, once you do the little drip thing, keep in mind the wood's going to absorb some of that moisture, but once it gets saturated, it'll just trickle down and hit the soil. But I would bury it. Okay, so we talked about Phytosphere. Here's compost tea immediately after, and you can see all these little bacteria and fungi. So imagine a disease spore landing there and trying to infect. It has to compete now. Whereas before, there might be a few little bacteria there, but not as heavy as that is. So it's more antagonism, competition, and so forth. So weeds. What is a weed? Undesirable plant, plant out of place, plants whose value has not been determined. I know this biodynamic farmer in Brentwood. He has, you look at his farm and you're going, oh my God, this is a weedy mess. But he harvests amaranth greens. It's not pigweed, it's amaranth greens. Purslane. Mexican farm workers love it. Stir-fried with chile verde, scrambled eggs. It's kind of succulent and has a very unique taste. So the thing to be careful too in ag fields is whether these were sprayed or not before you go out harvesting. One lady here is interesting in the Parks Commission was concerned about us spraying the grasses in the park, the lawn. And I told her, well, we don't spray any pesticides, any herbicides on the lawn. Occasionally I go when we're restoring or for sports fields or something, but overall we don't. Oh, that's a relief. She goes, my son forages weeds out of, Arroyo Park. And you can make dandelion soup and a bunch of stuff. But yes.
On the lower left, there was pigweed.
Pigweed, red root pigweed. And you can see the seed head there. Tiny little black shiny seeds. We're talking hundreds of thousands in that plant there. Once you let it go to seed, it's...
And they're amaranth?
Yeah, it's an amaranth,
Yeah, the stuff.
amaranthus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not to be confused with quinoa, which is different. Yeah. So why are they bad? They interfere with crop development, they reduce yields, they compete for nutrients and light, they produce allelopathic chemicals, they harbor pests, they obstruct cultivation and harvest, reduce the quality, plus they can be poisonous to some animals and humans. So which is easier to control? Both are pigweed. Same plant. Recently emerged, a nice little hula hoop, wham, wham, and you're done. Here you're going to need almost a chainsaw. And that a cheeseweed, the same thing. When cheeseweed is really small, it's the easiest thing to get rid of. But once it establishes itself there, good luck. So initial control save time and money and effort. 1 year of seeds is 7 years of weeds. This guy was a small farmer in Hollister, and he had peppers. And he had a regular job during the week. But on weekends, he would come and tend to his field. So it got away from him, and you can see he's going through hand. And the other thing was, he did have a tractor, but he didn't plant exactly on a straight line, as you can see. So he couldn't use a cultivator with the knives and stuff because he'd be taking out some of his plants. So he spent, I think he went halfway through that and he just gave up.
Are pre-emergence bad for the environment?
Yes, in a sense that they either percolate down into the water or they're washed off. You have to be very precise with the moisture on them. They specifically say like a 1/4 inch of water. If you put more, it either goes down below the seed bank or it washes off into the drains. And some of them are mixtures of the stuff we used to use. Well, we still have some, God, what was it called? Snapshot is a mixture of 2 herbicides. And, if you use it with a plan in mind to displace whatever weeds are going to come in there or plant something else, it's fine. The way it was used here, a lot of park maintenance people, was routine, kind of like Roundup. Well, we'll pre-emerge this, we'll pre-emerge this, we'll pre-emerge this, and it just, they don't realize the consequences. Yeah, it makes life easier, but we're talking, like I said, pollution reduction and exposure, which are an issue. So yeah, the soil is a wheat seed bank. We're talking billions of seeds, especially after years and years up on the top level. That's why I like solarization so much, even though it takes time. It basically cooks all of that and kind of sterilizes it, and you got a clean slate, except for a few things. Like I said, Bermuda is one, cheeseweed is another, but cheeseweed is easy to pick out. But all the grasses, especially the winter grasses, all the wild barley, wild oats, all of that, history.
Question.
Yes.
I've seen plastic west of Davis for strawberries.
Yes.
Plastic all over the landscape.
Right.
Plants coming up through it. Now, is that solarization?
No, that's basically, you're talking over here on the corner. If they use black plastic, it's for weeds, because it keeps black. Now, on the Central Coast, they'll use clear plastic because it's cold there and they want the soil to heat up quicker. But they also fumigate. They use methyl bromide. So they sterilize, they think they sterilize most of the organisms there. and you'll get quicker growth. They grow strawberries, they're almost year-round, almost 9 months. Whereas here, they're gonna, well, right now the climate has been favorable, so they'll still be going. But once it gets hot, the plants shut down, and you'll get real smushy, small strawberries. It's not good. But the ones here are probably for weeds. So using clean certified seed, well-composted manures, rotation helps prevent certain weeds that grow well with certain crops from accumulating.
Can you have a compost pile of weeds?
A compost pile of weeds. Well, if it breaks down, it's composted well, it'll kill off because the temperatures get really hot in the compost. Now, there's such thing as semi-composted stuff, and that's where the problems arise. Well-composted manures especially, because animals will eat all the stuff. If it's not composted well, you're going to get whatever they were eating growing in your garden. So let's quickly go through this. Textiles, mostly for landscaping. It's plastic, so eventually you're going to have to take it out. And it breaks down. Plastic and like strawberries, tomatoes, this is an organic grower, so they're using dark plastic, brown plastic here. No weeds will grow except up through where the plants are, but once the canopy is established, they do fine. It's an annual, so they'll go in and take everything out after. But you have all that plastic to throw in the landfill. Not very sustainable. Whoops. Cardboard, great. We use that for sheet mulching. The garden, a lot of gardeners there use it here in Davis, and it's great because you add, you're talking about that 4 or 6 inches of mulch. Well, then you have that cardboard under there, so it adds a little more time before it starts breaking down. That cardboard will break down, especially if you put it right now, since we're not going to get any rains. It'll probably stay intact with the soil moisture that's there. Probably break down by midsummer, and then by the time, you extend the life of your mulch for, I would say, another 6 months. Depending also how thick you put it down.
Now, are you digging down, like as it's deteriorating, you're putting your new mulch on before you do that? Do you
No.
dig down the wood chips and try to, no, you just add on top?
And actually, you can smother the weeds, unless they're going to break through the plat. But if you can lay the weeds down and just smother it on top of it, you don't need to pull the weeds out or weed whack it or anything like that. Once it's smothered with that and you get the mulch on top, they'll break down, the weeds. Well, actually,
It'll keep, it depends on how big your area is. It will keep going to.
Well, yeah, if it comes out to light. But if it's big enough that you smother it for at least 2 years, it'll kill the Bermuda too.
It slows them down.
Yeah. Because light is what, light is life.
It'll find any gaps.
Right.
So you gotta be really generous.
Sure. Same thing with field bindweed. So sheet mulching with cardboard newspaper. If you have a lot of newspaper, you can put piles of it there, do the same thing. See this garden here?
And what about all the inks and so on?
Mostly it's soy ink, so it's no biggie. Yeah.
You just don't use the shiny glossy.
Right, no shiny glossy magazine type thing, no. But most of this paper, they're biodegradable, and the ink isn't an issue. Wood bark sawdust, wood chips, straw mulch like we talked about. The trick with mulches is just trying to keep light out. With light, weeds will germinate, and besides moisture, of course, they need light. So most weeds that are on the top section, they get the sunlight, and but mulch, with their mode of action is just keeping everything dark and letting no light in.
It seems like when I use straw, I have so many more earwigs. Do you not?
Well, decaying organic matter, you'll find earwig. Now, earwigs can also be predators. They also can be pests. They're opportunists, depending what's there.
Just mow them right down.
Yeah. Also,
They're hard to get rid of.
slugs, they like dark, damp areas. Not that much. Cockroaches love decaying organic matter. So,
Beer traps.
yeah.
I put down beer traps and I get
Right. And then you've heard of Sluggo. Well, there's Sluggo 2, and that works for earwigs. It includes earwigs and sow bugs, the little roly-poly ones. Sluggo 2.
Is that the pesticide one, or is that the natural?
Well, it's iron phosphite. Yeah, iron phosphite. Good question. I haven't looked. You can look up online. I don't have, but it must be something.
So then the question we asked them back.
Yeah.
Well, what is it besides the slugs and snails?
Pre-irrigation. Water it, let the weeds come up, do a second one. Water them, wait, and then plant. That way at least you'll spend a quarter of the seed bank.
What was the cover crop? You just mentioned that.
Oh, well, in orchards mostly. Here it's a little difficult. Overwintering, some people will put fava beans or legumes and stuff in the gardens, vetch, just to increase organic matter, and it does smother weeds if,
And then you just dig it down in.
yeah, incorporate it.
And the fava's nitrogen fixing too, right?
Yes. So the use of transplants, of course, you're saving time. You give them a jump start from any weed. They're already advantaged. Once you close that little canopy in between the rows, shade them out, then your weeds are less and less. Mowers, weed whackers, bush hogs, depending on how big your garden is. But mostly, we use a lot of weed whackers around in the parks. Hose, good old hose, hula hose, hand pulling, solarization we talked about. Thermal flamethrowers or ultraviolet stuff. They sell them. These 5-gallon, look at the guy holding the back. We have little carts with them to move them around. But it works good on germinating broadleaves. But grasses, you burn the tips and the growing tip is buried. It'll come right back.
It doesn't do anything for Bermuda.
Oh, no. Right. Hand cultivators, you have rototillers and things. These are rice cultivators in Southeast Asia. They're, a piston motor powered, and they just move behind them. Animals, chicken tractors. If you can keep animals to a specific area, of course they'll eat your garden too. But these chicken tractors, for example, the width of a bed, and once you're done with that, harvesting that bed, you can put the chicken tractor there and they'll clean it up, fertilize it for you, get the insects, all the weeds, whatever's left of the vegetables, and then you move on, so forth, and move them on from area to area. They're great. They'll eat anything, including your garden. Here's a bigger version of it. You can see they move them around. They have their little housing things and their lamps and water and stuff. Sheep and goats, of course, depending on your scale. They have trained sheep in grapes and Napa to, since they can only reach so high, they'll eat, but they train them not to eat the grapes. And they would treat the grape leaves with that stuff that makes you throw up, ipecac. So they learned not to eat them. So then they'll go through the whole vineyard and just eat all the weeds and leave the grape leaves alone. Yeah, goats on the other hand, they'll climb up on top of trees and eat everything. You can tether them. And then chemical controls, I remember, was it corn gluten? It doesn't work here, maybe on the East Coast, but here actually it's fertilizer and it makes the weeds grow even better. Acetic acid, on the other hand, works like a charm on broadleaves. Kind of like the flaming with grasses. It'll burn the grass down to the ground, but the grass will come back. The broadleaves, though, when you get them when they're small, burns them down. Store-bought vinegar is about 5%, a little weak. This thing's like 20. You can get by watering it down to 12%, and it'll work. Roundup.
Misuse, what's the proper?
Well, it's missed and overused. Like I said, our staff here in parks. It was routine. Rather than going and hoeing and stuff, it's much easier spraying, and then next one's come out and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. Well, it's a valuable material. It works great. But the thing is, it's been used so much. Now there's resistance. Now there's, Italian ryegrass. You can see some of it growing around here. On the roadsides, Caltrans, you'll see the horseweed. These long, spindly, they call it mare's tail or horseweed. It's resistant. There's some of the amaranths are resistant. Cheeseweed, tolerant. It turns a little color off. It won't kill it.
Does Roundup decay so into the
It's a salt.
toxic stuff?
Well, it's a salt, a glyphosate-based salt, but Monsanto tells us it's okay. I really don't know. I know some of the weed scientists on campus, it depends. For example, those tree wells around trees that are kept bare. Here we try to use mulch now and use these living mulches and stuff, but before it was like just spraying Roundup around the tree trunk. Number one, you're spraying roots, and you're spraying the stem of a plant, which is the trunk. Sometimes there'll be some growth. So you're giving it sublethal doses, if you will. Kind of like the colony collapse, with a midocoprin. Just a little bit. I go by campus and I see these perfectly sterile tree wells, and I look at the trees and they're diseased. They're staghorning, they look kind of weak, and except the oaks. Of course, the oaks, they don't do anything around them, but all the other trees around, especially around grasses and stuff, in the lawns. What is the effect of the percolation down on the roots, for example? Or the exposure, or exposing it to the trunk. They say, oh, no, it's okay to spray the trunk. Well, sometimes there's, little suckers, coming out from the tree. The root itself is exposed, and then you get the lawnmower or a weed whacker that cuts a wound in there, and then you go and you spray for grasses, and you it's much easier to just, what we've been doing, we've been trying to put this no-mow fescue, kind of a living mulch, around the base of the trunks of the trees. We did that in South Davis, and it's been there for 6 years now, and it's fine. It's reduced labor. We haven't sprayed them. We do occasionally go in when all the broadleaves get out of control in there and Bermuda grass tends to creep up around it. There's this one herbicide, Turflawn, which for some reason kills Bermuda grass, but that's the only grass it kills, and broadleaves. So we treated that once in 3 years and haven't done anything to it, as opposed to going every 3 weeks and spraying Roundup.
What was that?
Turflawn. Triclofer is a chemical name. And in agriculture, it's called Garlon. It's a selective in the sense that it only kills broadleaves and Bermuda, like I said, for some unknown reason. But it leaves grasses and fescues and stuff alone.
Was Roundup, did you use Roundup on pepperweed?
Yes. There, though, we mowed. We mowed it to stimulate growth, because once it flowers, that's the thing with Roundup too, you gotta hit it when the plant isn't putting out nutrients from the roots for growth, because Roundup is a systemic. It has to get absorbed down into the plant. So in the case of, let's say, freshly young Bermuda growing, you spray it, and yeah, it'll kind of ding it a little bit, but it keeps growing, and it doesn't kill it until it flowers. When you see the little Bermuda flowers up, and not stressed, make sure it's watered, then it's achieved its goal of reproducing, setting seeds. So now its photosynthates are being absorbed down into the root. And that's when you hit it with Roundup, because it'll take down the herbicide and kill the rhizomes and everything else. Pepperweed, the same. When it's growing, yeah, you can spray it. It'll kind of damage it, but it won't kill it completely. And it's rhizomerous also, and throws seed. So you let it go to flower, then you mow it, and then it'll put out a flower again, and that's when you hit it it'll take down and kill off the rhizomes. Now, the job we did at the North Pond, any resurgence of it? We got most of it, but I remember you guys also cut the flowers on some of them, and we couldn't tell where it was. But the stuff that we did see, I went there recently, and I couldn't find any.
I'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
No, but,
Anyhow, so it's 8 o'clock. I didn't get to vertebrate pests, but best thing for that is trapping. Don't use baits or anything like that. And adopt kittens and dogs. Yeah.
We don't have a rodent problem at all.
Well, and you have the feral cats there. Yeah.
Because the school district next door
Yeah.
has a couple feral.
Oh, and across the street, the public works yard, that whole industrial area from Mel and Pole Line is just one big colony of feral cats.
Yeah. Yeah.
And same thing, we have grass seeds stored outside under a little shed there that you would think, the rodents would just do a number, but they haven't touched it. There's kitties around there, so. So anyhow, I brought some material there. Please feel free, and if you could, please sign in, and appreciate all you coming, and hopefully we'll see you at some other shows. Yes, thank you. And if you have any questions or anything, please feel free to call me